I don't know what I expected to happen, but I certainly didn't expect that. My name's Chris O'Leary, and I'm a survivor of the Catholic sex abuse crisis in St. Louis. And I watched with some interest the actions of Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro, had some brief communications with him. And that set an expectation for me about how the crime of the sex abuse of children would be handled. I watched Shapiro's press conference and press conferences where he discussed the Pennsylvania grand jury report and put forth the findings, and watched how he treated survivors, how he treated survivors with respect and compassion. And what I saw from Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitt was anything but compassion. It was the exact opposite. And I was surprised, but I shouldn't have been surprised. I've talked before about my experiences with current Missouri Senator and prior Attorney General Josh Hawley, how his investigation of the Archdiocese of St. Louis was a sham, a fraud. I begged them to talk to me because I could tell them where the bodies were buried. I could tell them exactly where to look, and they never bothered to talk to me under Hawley. And then things got worse under Schmitt. And I actually got a little preview of that before Schmitt was even in power. I think it was December 29th. I got a series of text messages or direct messages on Twitter from a family member of Tom Albus, the first Assistant Attorney General of the state of Missouri. I know Albus from Mary Queen of Peace, the baseball committee. And on December 29th, one of his family members came after me, basically calling me a liar, making all these kinds of accusations about how I was lying about my abuse story. And that made it clear to me that I wasn't going to get a fair shake from the Missouri Attorney General's office. I mean, I hadn't, at least Attorney General Hawley, now Senator Hawley's investigation was completely useless and fraudulent, but at least they didn't attack me, unlike current Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitt and his first assistant, Tom Albus. And that, that just gave me a sense of what the vibe was like within the Attorney General's office and the kind of treatment that I was going to receive from the Missouri Attorney General's office under Eric Schmitt and his first assistant, Tom Albus. And that was, it was terrible. It was traumatic, but sadly it wasn't surprising. I had taken abuse from other Catholics, and it wasn't surprising that Eric Schmitt, who's a Catholic, Tom Albus, who's a Catholic, it didn't surprise me that they treated me similarly. That's just how Catholics in St. Louis treat survivors. Even though, the job of the Attorney General of the state of Missouri is to represent all Missourians, not just Catholics who are loyal with the church. It isn't the job of the Attorney General of the state of Missouri to single out survivors. You would think he and his team would represent survivors, but that's not what Eric Schmitt does. But so I've talked previously about problems getting Attorney General Hawley's team to talk to me. It seemed like they didn't want to know where the bodies were buried, the misdeeds of the Archdiocese of St. Louis, how the Archdiocese of St. Louis works to cover things up, because I had documents that showed exactly what the pattern was. So I spent 4 months trying to get Senator, then Missouri Attorney General Josh Hawley's team to talk to me and to find out that information so they would know where to look within the records of the Archdiocese of St. Louis. They never bothered to talk to me. The only time they would engage with me is when they got the sense that the press was on the story. And nothing changed under current Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitt. I ended up talking to an investigator from his team in February or March of 2019. Again, only because I used my contacts with the press. You know, I'm a survivor and I'm out, and the Post-Dispatch has written about me, and I used my contacts with the press to get the Post-Dispatch, alert the Post-Dispatch to the story. And they would start calling around. And whenever they would call around, then all of a sudden the Missouri Attorney General's office would be all interested in my story. But only if the press was interested in the story. They didn't care on their own. So I talked to this investigator February, March of 2019. I think it was late February. He seemed fairly skeptical, although it was interesting. I don't think he had much experience with sex crimes. Although what was interesting was that he actually knew one of the people involved in the story that kind of set it all off for me. There was a New York Times piece in early March 2002 that named my abuser Father Leroy Valentine, and the people who came forward, he knew them. I think he went to school with them or something. So that kind of changed his attitude. But as I said, nobody contacted me. It's so horrible. Again, I could tell them where the bodies were buried. I knew how. I had a document that proved, and I had my experience about how the Archdiocese of St. Louis conceals information. Essentially what happened in Buffalo, I know Siobhan O'Connor a little bit. I've talked to her some. And she's the whistleblower in Buffalo who went on 60 Minutes. Essentially, what she found, or what she revealed, was that the Archdiocese of Boston, or of Buffalo, keeps a separate record where they kept all their kind of files about abusers and abuse and that kind of stuff and priests in general in one set of files, and then the worst information they kept in a binder in a broom closet in the rectory. So that if you subpoenaed all the documentation and didn't know what to look for, you wouldn't find it. And that's the role that Siobhan O'Connor played. Was she's like, hey guys, hey police, law enforcement, you need to go look for this binder in this closet in the rectory of the bishop's residence, because this binder contains all the worst information, and it's kept separate from the main information, so that if prosecutors tried to subpoena the information and just got the records from the storage room, they would miss out on the most important information. And I ended up sharing this information with an ADA from Manhattan, and I think I also tried to call the Dallas Police Department, because Dallas did a raid on the Archdiocese of Dallas and secured all their files. But if Dallas is anything like St. Louis and like Buffalo, then there are secret documents that are kept separately from the main mass of documents, and you have to know about those documents. So that's what I was trying to tell the Attorney General Eric Schmitt about, and what I had previously tried to tell now Senator, then Attorney General Josh Hawley. It's like, I've got a document that proves that what the Archdiocese of St. Louis is doing is they're taking documents from, in my case, my abuser, Father Leroy Valentine, and they've put these documents, they've lost them, scattered them into the files of other abusers. And I happened to get in contact with a family member of one of the abusers and realized that a file related to my abuser, Father Leroy Valentine, was located in the file for her family member. And essentially what happened is that somebody went through the file of my abuser, Father Leroy Valentine, and either threw away the documents, or in the case of this one document, which I have in my possession, which I tried to give the Attorney General of Missouri, both Josh Hawley and Eric Schmitt, I tried to give them this document that proved that Timothy Cardinal Dolan was handling abuse cases in early March 2002. And that's why the Archdiocese of St. Louis was trying to hide that information, because they don't want Dolan connected to the crimes of Father Valentine. The narrative of the Archdiocese of St. Louis is that Valentine didn't start acting out until the early 80s, by which time Dolan was in D.C. or in Rome. They're trying to preserve Dolan's papability, and it's understandable, but it's despicable. And you would think it's criminal, and you would think that the Attorney General of the state of Missouri, both Josh Hawley and Eric Schmitt, would want to know about that criminal activity. But it's not the case. They couldn't be bothered to get that information. And I told them over and over again, I'm like, I've got this document, it proves what's going on. It proves that you can't just subpoena the records, you have to go into you have to look more carefully. You can't just subpoena the records for the abusive priests, you have to subpoena the records for all priests, because documents are hidden, stashed in those files, assuming they weren't just thrown away. But I couldn't get the Attorney General of the state of Missouri to, either Hawley or Schmitt, interested in that story. I know that Schmitt is a Catholic, and I know that Albus is a Catholic. I don't know about Hawley, but Hawley seems to be trying to put himself forward as a conservative and a defender of the Catholics and a friend of the Catholics. Blah, 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 blah. But so, again, I reconnected with Attorney General Eric Schmitt's team in July of 2019 and got another meeting with them by alleging, well, I'd been going to the FBI, trying to get the FBI to act, and they wouldn't act. They're worthless. I handed them my abuser and his crimes, including violations of the Mann Act, and to my knowledge, the FBI never investigated any of that. And my abuser's dead now, so I'll never be able to confront him or at least see him perp walked or anything like that. The FBI is you're just worthless. You guys suck. But so I met with this same investigator from the Missouri Attorney General's office and a lawyer in mid to late July 2019 at the Missouri Attorney General's office in the old post office in downtown St. Louis. The investigator and then a lawyer who'd driven over from Kansas City that morning. And I put together basically a whole presentation with documents and headers and just kind of walked them through my whole case, including all these documents. One document that proved perjury in a document called the Matrix, which was, the Matrix was produced as a result of civil litigation. There's perjury in that document, multiple cases of perjury, again, trying to protect Dolan. But so I gave them this information. They seem interested in it, and I got my hopes up to a degree, but then lo and behold, I find out a few weeks later that the investigation's been killed, wrapped up. I told the team, the investigator, the lawyer from Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitt's office, what the crimes were, how to prove them, where the documents were located, and rather than investigating that, the investigation was just killed, shut down, completed. Which is, needless to say, pretty hard to process. I thought the whole point of doing an investigation was to find and uncover crimes. But obviously, Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitt had no interest in doing what Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro did. Shapiro, I'll give him all the props in the world. Schmitt was completely worthless. He wouldn't do the same. Essentially, I think the information that I gave Schmitt and his team scared them and led them to shut down the investigation, because it was just a matter of weeks after I gave my testimony in July of 2019, being very specific about crimes that were committed and problems with documents and the missing documents, that the investigation was shut down. But so then in mid-September 2019, Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitt held a press conference to announce the results of the finding. And I went down to that press conference I don't know why I went down there. I was just kind of compelled to be there. I was going to stand vigil, but then I'm like, screw it. I'm going to try to be in the room, just stand there and listen and represent survivors. That's really just what I wanted to do. Is I wanted to be there and represent myself and other survivors. And that's a lot of what I'm doing, is kind of representing other survivors, to bear witness for survivors, which I didn't think was too much to ask for. So I walk in the building at the same time as a KMOV cameraman. I didn't get his name. Asian, maybe Filipino guy. Cameraman, not an anchor, but a cameraman. So we ended up walking into the Attorney General's office at the same time, met down at the desk, walked into the Attorney General's office, chatted for a few minutes in the Attorney General's office, and then a younger guy from, I assume, the Attorney General's office came to walk us into the conference room where the press conference was going to be held. Again, this is mid-September 2019. The press conference held by Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitt to release the findings of the investigation of the Archdiocese of St. Louis. So as we walk in the room, this young minder guy, asks us who we were. The KMOV guy replies who he is, and then I say I'm a survivor. I identify myself as a survivor. And the minder guy immediately goes like, well, this is a closed press conference. It's not open to the public. And I'm like, I'm a survivor. It's no big deal. It'll be fine. And the minder guy kind of gets a look on his face and looks ahead, and the KMOV photographer guy throws me a look, and I throw him an eye roll. But we just keep walking into the room. So he escorts us into the conference room. The KMOV guy sets up in the middle of the conference room, sets up his camera. I go over in the corner because, I'm not there to protest. I'm just there to bear witness, to stand in the corner. But the KMOV guy goes, if they try to throw you out of this room, I'm going to roll on you and get this all on tape. So that's exactly what he did, and that's exactly what they did. After a few minutes, so the KMOV guy gets set up. I'm in the corner of the room, just standing there, I don't have any posters out or anything. I'm not setting up anything. About 10 people from the Missouri Attorney General's office walk back in to throw me out of the room. And the KMOV guy starts rolling on me. He didn't have a mic on me, but he had a directional mic to see what was being said. So there I am, and the KMOV guy got this all on tape. I'm standing off with about 10 members of the Missouri Attorney General's office who are all trying to throw me out of the room. There were about four people in my face, another 2 people farther back in the room, and about 4 people out in the hallway kind of scurrying about and all upset, I can tell. The Attorney General's not there, Albus isn't there. But so after about 5 minutes or so of my going on and asserting my right to be there and expressing my right to be there and explaining I just want to be there to bear witness, they send in the cops. So 3 City of St. Louis cops come in, and they're like, all right, you need to go with us. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And again, the KMOV guy got this all on tape. So I walk out of the building with the police officers. They're fine. They're cool. Nobody touches me because I'm irritated and I'm agitated, but I'm not resisting because it's not the cops' fault. And again, KMOV got the whole thing on tape. So I go outside the building and stand outside the west door and stand vigil with one of my signs like I always do. The press conference concludes after about 45 minutes or so. And during that time, I actually see the investigator who I've now talked to twice, and he gives me copies of the reports. I've got the full investigation report, the executive summary, and the appendix to the investigation report. So I'm going through all this stuff while the press conference is going on, and then the press conference concludes, and the KMOV guy comes out and interviews me and does about a 10-minute stand-up interview of me, asking me all these questions about what's going on, just to provide some context to the footage that he shot inside the conference room in the Missouri Attorney General's office. Then Abby Larico and her photographer from KSDK come out and do the same thing, and I tell them the whole story. All the press, all the print media ignore me. Although I'm standing there like 15 feet from the door, I'm just right there holding a sign, obviously a survivor. But what's frustrating about this, and this gets into the cover-up that Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitt is part of and party to. So you've got this cover-up where I've talked before about Hawley, and what I assume that Hawley is doing is he thinks he's helping the Archdiocese of St. Louis and Catholics, and he's protecting the Archdiocese of St. Louis and the Catholic Church, when in truth what he's doing is he's enabling. He's enabling the sexual abuse of children and, in my case, the abuse of the abused. And that's exactly what Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitt is doing. He's enabling the abuse of the abused at a minimum by the Archdiocese of St. Louis, and if not, increasing the likelihood that kids will continue to be sexually abused. Because if there's no accountability, if the Missouri Attorney General refuses to hold the Archdiocese of St. Louis accountable, if the press, if KMOV, if KSDK refuses to hold the Archdiocese of St. Louis accountable, then why will the Archdiocese of St. Louis change anything? And I can tell you they certainly haven't changed anything in terms of helping survivors, despite the Pope's Vos Estis, and the Pope won't hold the Archdiocese of St. Louis accountable. The Pope, a little over a year ago, put out Vos Estis Lux Mundi, his de facto survivor's Bill of Rights. He refuses to enforce that. So what you've got in terms of the Archdiocese of St. Louis is you've got all the powerful institutions, the press, KSDK, KMOV, and then rolling up to the Attorney General of the state of Missouri, Eric Schmitt, rather than supporting survivors, helping to investigate the crimes of the Catholic Church and the Archdiocese of St. Louis, and helping to protect children. Rather than doing that, you've got Eric Schmitt enabling the Catholic Church, furthering the abuse of the abused at a minimum, and increasing the likelihood that children in the state of Missouri, the city of St. Louis, the Archdiocese of St. Louis will be sexually abused. That seems despicable, and to have first Senator, then Missouri Attorney General Josh Hawley, and now Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitt do that to, I guess, under the guise of helping, supporting, protecting the Catholic Church, the Archdiocese of St. Louis, but in truth enabling the abuse of the abused and increasing the likelihood that children will continue to be sexually abused. That's just unconscionable and, in my opinion, disqualifying.